for today, and so I hope that more people will join us, but at this point I don't want to be very considerate of your time, and I really want to thank you again for meeting with us. If you would give us, this is a class dealing with special topics, in this case trying to get together with facilities and understand the various projects that are going on right now. These guys, I'm spending one lecture a week trying to do a little bit of prep work in background and context, and then we're going out in the field and looking. So we're trying to bring what is usual preservation practice in line with what is actually, being done in the field. In some cases we're finding some discrepancies and some issues that we need to work through. So we're hoping this will be a useful exercise for everybody. Also, we've already got one student, Scott Powell, the guy who's sick today. He's got an internship with facilities and will be carrying on in that same manner. So we're trying to form an alliance between the preservationists dealing with management and maintenance issues and facilities who are dealing with that and other things, and trying to see what we can do to have a better approach to our old buildings, all 70 of them. Yeah. This is not a particularly old building, but it's a very significant building, and it's also our home. And it's good for these people to know, our students, all of us, to know something about process and how it works, and what we would see and might reflect on the deficiencies in the process from your perspective. I mean, nothing's perfect, and we work to make improvements where we can, as long as the lawyers will let us, right? Yeah. So, having said that, why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Brad Weiland. I'm a senior project manager with our facilities group here on campus. I've got a couple of project managers that report to me. We work in the architectural engineering group of facilities, and we're responsible for projects of all sizes. It could be a bathroom renovation. It could be a $50 million project like this. So that's my role in this particular project. This is one of my projects, but this is my project. And I'll introduce Andy Clark, who's our principal with Leolio, which is the lead firm on our design team, and I'll let Andy kind of give his bio.
Yeah, sure. So I'm, as you said, I'm principal with Leolio Architecture. I head up our higher ed market. It's my expertise. We have a lot of different markets in our office, including preservation. We do a lot of historic preservation
You did
work.
the custom house, as I recall.
Yeah, the custom house, the old exchange building, working on the old city jail currently, as well as a historic courthouse down in Savannah, the Tomochichi Courthouse. So a lot of...
Say that again?
The Tomochichi Courthouse.
Okay, I suppose that's an Indian name, right?
It's a really cool building if you haven't seen it.
Where is that again?
In Savannah.
Okay, I'll have to check it out next time I'm there.
Yeah, so we have a lot of, this is an intersection of a lot of different markets, so because we like to collaborate with each other and do things that really can bring value to the projects. This project is not, as the city would describe, over 50 years old, not a historic property. It was built in the late 70s. What is unique about it is one of the late century modernist buildings, and one of the few late century modernist style buildings in Charleston. What's also unique about it is obviously being directly across the street from Randolph Hall, the Cistern Yard, and the Green Way, which used to be Green Street, is now a very nice part of the campus. So in terms of preservation, this project, our goal was to preserve the character of the area, height, scale, and mass, as we say, VAR lingo. We've really worked hard to keep the additions at 2 stories along St. Philip Street, so that we could respect and we could be deferential to Randolph Hall. So it's respectful of this important building across the street. And then also referential in terms of materials and details to the Simmons Center, being a very unique aspect of late century modernist building. And then also kind of toning down some of the more brutalist details of this building.
Oh, wait a minute. Would Tom Penny agree with that? I don't know.
Well, I'll ask him.
Are you going to put a roof on it?
This courtyard will remain.
Yeah. Although it's going to be smaller, right?
It'll be a little bit smaller to accommodate the new Black Box Theater.
And will it align with the Greenway?
It will. So that's part of the reason this wall that you're leaning against will be demolished, to make way for the new Black Box, which will come out to about right at the edge here. So we could fit that area in without, losing that termination of the Greenway into the courtyard. The other thing that the courtyard will do is raise up to the level of the sidewalk, so that 1, you don't have the flooding issues, but 2, it becomes more part of the public realm as an urban space. rather than being the sunken kind of private courtyard that it is now. We really wanted to make that part of the public space in the urban area.
Can I footnote that for you?
Sure.
Based on our discussions, it's, that fellow William White, who I set out the social life of small urban spaces. That was one of his big things, was to avoid stairs. Having said that, however, if you talk to Nathaniel in our architectural history department, he's livid about this. So, you know, this is an interesting question back and forth.
Yeah. We've worked with Nathaniel as part of the committee.
Oh, you can't work without him, right?
Yeah, he's great. So that's a brief overview. I'd love to hear what you're interested in and how it can relate to your class. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, I suppose everybody's had a chance to take a look at the drawings, more or less. So if we were to describe it, this wall is coming out, this courtyard is being made smaller. Would you establish the goals and objectives of the remodeling in addition to earthquake proofing or whatever else we're doing?
Sure. So earthquake, part of that is foundation, and part of that is improving some of the structural core. One of the stairwells will be completely rebuilt to give it some strength in the core, the diaphragm. I'm not a structural engineer, but we have to know enough to be able to help coordinate it and work it into the design. So there will be when Cato was built, they added a new concrete stair, cast concrete stair.
Yeah, that's the place to go in case of nuclear attack, by the way.
Right. And so we need to counterbalance that with a new core stair that has the same rigidity as that one. To allow the building to, we really want the building to be able to move with the lateral fluctuations in an earthquake. The biggest part about the foundation is something called liquefaction. That the soil loses its bearing capacity when the water comes in. So we're going to have to put the new additions on piles, which we'll be using micro piles, and a combination of micro piles and helical piles, which are just different methods of supporting the foundation all the way down to the marl.
Are you drilling it then?
The helical piles will be drilled, and then the other micro piles will be driven.
The difference, of course, is that the driven piles has a greater impact on old buildings like this. Are you doing checking the old buildings before you start the process for cracks and stuff?
Well, that'll be part of the GC's or the CMR, Construction Manager at Risk, part of their responsibility. But that's part of the reason why we're using micro piles rather than pre-stressed concrete piles, and the helical piles help with that. Reduces the vibration and settlement of adjacent buildings, which is very important in the historic preservation of the surrounding area.
Very good. So your goal is to make it earthquake proof and bring it up to code. Were there any programmatic goals within the college that you were addressing with this?
Certainly within the building. I mean, we did a full assessment, and I think you guys were part of all that. A point paper was written, and that's how we sort of got here. It's a 40-plus-year-old building. All of a sudden, there's a leaky roof, there's leaky windows, there's mold, there's all those things that the occupants now start to complain and talk about, and so that builds over time to a point where, what do we want to do? And so we do a condition assessment of the building and determine, the best path forward to get it to code, to address all these issues, new roof, all these things. Next thing you know, you're essentially remodeling and or building a new building.
What is it, 50% you have to bring it up to code altogether, is it?
Yeah, I think it's...
There's different levels of alteration in the existing building code. We're at level 3, which is the most intense, which means all new construction has to comply with the current code. And since we're replacing the MEP systems, all of our new energy will comply with all the new energy codes for mechanical and electrical and plumbing, and any of the new additions will be made compliant with the structural code as well. But yeah, there's different thresholds that trigger that. There's like a 10% gravity load increase or a 5% lateral load increase, a lot of very specific technical things that we can go into.
So I assume that we're really not getting appreciably more classroom space, is that right? Just this other programmable space, the dark room?
We are getting more classroom. I think some of the primary objectives was, one, to create a proper lobby space for Spoleto events and student performances.
As opposed to what we have here.
So that's why increasing that lobby space, as this is one of the college's most public interfaces with Spoleto, also with the student performances. And so adding a new black box theater, upgrading the lobby and some of those public spaces, and increasing the classroom space, and really updating to a more, up-to-date learning style, more active learning, collaborative learning rather than the traditional lecture style. And then with this building, of course, being the arts, we have very specific printmaking, sculpture, studio arts, music. They all have the very specific program requirements, and it hasn't been really upgraded for over 40 years, so it's really bringing it up to speed with today's teaching and learning style.
Well, you said something very interesting. I introduced them to Christopher Alexander last lecture period, and one of his big points, of course, is to change the way we organize our teaching space. Would you elaborate just a little bit on what you're proposing there?
Well, the more collaborative learning style really requires more square foot per student. The lecture style where you squeeze in as many desks as possible, it's a faculty member lecturing to the students who are more passive. And today's learning style is more active, where you have peer-to-peer learning, you have small group learning, and you need tables that can be shifted around. Put chairs and tables on casters so they can be reconfigured to be seminar to.
You're going to have flex space with partitions and stuff?
Not in classroom spaces, but we do have, for one of the active learning classrooms, we have monitors on all 4 walls, so that as they're projecting, they can project on all sides, and each small group can be seeing the same thing, but discussing together and learning from each other's perspective and experiences. So that peer-to-peer learning, it's not always instructor-led, sometimes it's more student-to-student.
Right.
And the flipping the classroom model, where lectures may be videotaped and watched as homework, and then in class you're actively working together rather than listening.
So in terms of translating what that means to things like square footage and stuff, how is it increasing the allotment of classroom space per student based on, the new way of doing it?
So a traditional lecture style classroom is an 18 to 20 square feet per student, and an active learning is more about 25 square feet per student.
And how does that compare with studios, say?
Well, studios
which is even more active, right?
Yeah, the studios have always been active, ideally, so there's not a lot of change there. It's more about the technology, computing in the arts, and providing access to computers and software that assist the more hands-on, tactile craftsmanship and artisan work.
You can reflect on this too, and it affects us in looking at the studio, is that we have a different kind of studio. It's more of a drafting studio over at 12 Bull, and this is more of sculpture and so forth like that. How would you compare and contrast the requirements, classroom requirements, square footage and so forth for those two kinds of studios?
For a drafting studio?
Right, versus art studio.
So hand drafting.
They're hand drafting and computer actually set up for both.
Yeah, so traditional hand drafting, which I took, I'm old enough to have taken hand drafting.
These guys have to do it too.
Good. With a parallel bar or with a T-square, you need a larger 36 by 48 surface that you can mount your equipment to and be able to get your sheets rolled out to do your drafting. A computer, obviously, if you're doing computer drafting, it's less surface area, and then there's more support for data racks and computers, and depending on what kind of systems you're using. I don't have data offhand of what square foot per.
When we did the classroom analysis, please feel free. We're just talking. Feel free to. I'm sorry, what am I saying? When they were doing the classroom assessment before, they never really addressed full tilt. Drafting studio versus any other kind of studio, and I felt it was left out of a lot of the class assessment before, and that's something that particularly hits us, in what we do. So I was just curious if you've made any progress in that regard.
I don't know how much progress has been made. I don't know.
Well, we have our own classroom requirements that are really not being addressed by anything the college does right now. So I just throw in a blurb. We have 20 students in 2 baby rooms in an old house with computers and drawing tables and drafting files, and it's like, nothing.
Well, the idea is that with current classroom design is to make them as flexible as possible so that they can be utilized not only by multiple groups now, but with the rate of technology changing. In 5 years, it's going to be something totally different. So how can we plan for that? It's really hard to plan for the unknown, but flexibility is the goal.
So in terms of construction techniques used on these buildings in order to plan for flexibility, at one point we all put it in a ceiling. Now I think it's preferred to put it in a grid and a floor, depending on who you talk to. But now with wireless, well, actually, now that we have wireless, I've never dealt with more wires in my life. But that's another story.
That's right. Yeah.
So how do you see that fitting in the envelope, and how do you try to plan for that? Do you use plenum, floors, ceilings? How do you plan for that?
Yeah, well, in this particular project, it's challenging because in the late 70s, this was a 12'6" floor-to-floor height, which now would have to be at least 15 to support the mechanical system. So we're very challenged in the amount of plenum space between the ceilings and the floors, and with a lot of existing walls and trying to retain as much as we can, it makes it challenging. But I think the flexibility comes in, giving the space in each classroom and then selecting furnishings that are, reconfigurable, and floor boxes in classrooms so that you can plug in furniture. Those are the kind of the things that we look at these days.
Yeah.
And from facility side and the pure construction concept, we have a fixed budget. There's no more money, so we kind of look at it from a pure facilities maintenance, long-term approach to the building. Let's get as much infrastructure in the building we can. So we'll, in whatever those spaces are that we can run technology, conduit, whatever it might be, we want to put that infrastructure in so it down the road does give us flexibility, so we're not tearing walls and ceilings out. There may be things that we put in on an infrastructure side that give us flexibility down the road. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm wondering about partition walls. Are they removable so that you can get flexibility, or are we all stuck with an earthquake problem?
Well, I think most of the new walls would be light gauge metal studs, so they're pretty easy to reconfigure. A lot of the existing walls are concrete masonry, so they're less flexible. One of the things that affects preservation in a tangential way is sustainability.
Sure.
And so
it's not tangential at all.
Yeah, well, things that we're doing to improve the stormwater runoff and to improve the energy efficiency and the indoor air quality, there's going to be a lot of impact to not putting additional burden on adjacent buildings, to allow this building to be able to stay for another 40 years, really improving the energy efficiency of the new equipment. And
so will it be a LEED certified building?
What's that?
Will it be a LEED certified building?
Well, we're going to be using green globes, which is a similar system to LEED. We'll be going for 2 green globes, which is equivalent to LEED silver.
Okay.
So it's the second layer up. So we've already done our first assessment and gotten good favorable report. We have to achieve 55% of the available points in order to get that, and we're at 60 right now.
So I hope I'm not belaboring this too much, but please, guys, if you have questions, jump in. But are you using solar? Are you using recycled material? Are you putting in bike racks? What are you doing to address that?
There will be bike racks. Solar was not really feasible on this just because of the infrastructure costs. There's not a lot of credits in our state right now with the energy companies, and so it's something that could be converted later. So we're designing, we've got a concrete roof deck on top of the new structures, so that allows better conversion later when the rates are more favorable. But it's about improving the energy ratings of the equipment and exceeding the ASHRAE requirements so that we're exceeding the energy code to get those points. So it's a lot better than the base building code, and the base building code is way better than what it was in the 70s.
Right. Would you feel like the rate of return on the equipment is worth it at this point?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think so. And along those lines, we are putting a central energy plant. I don't know if you saw the plans
I saw
in that detail, but
to it,
there's a central energy plant going up on the roof of this building and the new additions on the back side, which will supply cooling, hot water, things like that for Simmons, Cato next door, College of is part of it. We're changing a few things around there, but that impacts the electrical distribution system on campus. So that's being upgraded because of new power demand for this project as well. We're adding load on the system. The system's already maxed out. So, you know, the construction of this project is integral to the whole campus. I mean, everything gets tied together, chilled water for cooling, things like that. So there's a lot of moving parts in a project this size, particularly in a community like this, and it's not just isolated. So
yeah, that's a really good point that you're making. You know, we started off looking at the pavilion structure that was being proposed over there, which is a baby thing, right? And then compare that to what's happening here. You know, the process, the study, the knock-on effects are just in a whole different, you know, league. And you get right down to it. So how long has the work been taken to get to this point?
Well,
that's a really good question. You've been at it way longer than I have.
Yeah, this is an outlier. We were awarded this project in 2012.
Okay.
And
a couple of days ago.
Yeah. So we're going on 9 years, but it hasn't been actively. You know, essentially, the project when we started in 2012 was, let's do an assessment of the condition of the building and do an assessment of what we need and see how much that costs, and then analyze how much we can afford. So the budget has scaled up and then back down and up and back down, depending on, you know, what the college can afford, and trying to prioritize the top needs.
Right.
And so in 2019 is when we really got started on this phase that we're working on to move it through construction.
Yeah.
So it's really, you know, it's a project of this scale really is a 3 to 4 year project from start to finish in a perfect world.
Right. Well, this reflects on what we were talking about last classroom, how architects, once you tell them what they want, what they're supposed to design, they're perfectly happy to give you a cost. But while they're in the conceptual stage and in the programmatic stage and so forth, you know, nobody's in charge of the time there. It just takes what time it does. So this is part of the process.
Yeah.
This is a unique project. As Andy said, he's been on it since 2012 in some form. But so from the college perspective, think about this. We've gone through at least 2 presidents.
Yeah, right.
At least 2, 3.
Yeah.
3 presidents. So the president of the college always has their sort of imprint on how they see the direction of things going, including construction projects. And so what one president may love, the new president may not. Coupled with that, we have a BAR, and there's evolution in the BAR process as well, with new people in and out, and so that approval. So from the design construction point of view, we've got a made up with administration and their wishes and goals, and what they deem they'd like to see. That's got to now blend with and get approval from BAR in that process, as well as the state and the Office of State Engineers. So there's a lot of input from a variety of entities that ultimately sign off on a design. And so this last go-around, since we've started, we've got great buy-in from all the end users, the faculty. They all, through a series of meetings the way we did it, which was great. They all had input. We listened, did a lot of listening, the team did. Took down lots of notes, copious pages of notes, and then came back and said, hey, here, are we capturing what you want? And so we whittled that down to essentially a design that we were moving forward with. Got buy-in from senior administration, put a great proposal together, which you've seen for the BAR, and went through that process. And so we're ticking all the boxes off, if you will, to move forward to an actual project getting started. So, but it's a lengthy process. For sure.
Yeah, right. And headache sometimes, but you know, in a decade when it's all done, we'll be really happy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, that's a great introduction and a great overview. You guys, any thoughts related to a large building like this, and you know what you're coming into it with, and you know what you may be learning here that you didn't realize before? It's complicated, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, the process, the lengthy process. I mean, the fact that they started in 2012 it was conceived to be. And my personal opinion is that once looking at the designs, I do like it. I don't have any personal attachment to this space right there, and I don't often use it because it's a swamp area.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the new design, that was a problem, and we recognized that. And in the new design, the team came up, I think, with some great solutions. With again, tying in the greenway to our entrance. You know, when you look there, you'll see the entrance of a new arts building. You know, and it'll have color. It'll flow from the greenway, which was one of the intents. Again, tying back to the historical piece with colors and things like that. And then, how do we fix this space? Because you're absolutely right. It's really not. It catches water.
Yeah, and there's sort of like a disconnect when you enter from this side, you know, from Calhoun, and you walk through the building, and as you get up to right here, there's this real disconnect with, you know, the arts. It's really communicated back in the back half, and then it's like there's no proper maintenance as you go up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
there are a lot of issues there.
The new space is going to be great. It'll be a great gathering spot. It'll be at street level, like Andy said. We're going to have some movable benches that will sort of lock in place, but can be reconfigured so there can be outdoor performances if they wanted to.
Well, we've enjoyed having them play outside.
It's
here
been
during
music's
the
been wonderful, hasn't it? I mean, that's just walk across campus, and even if we're just practicing, it just sounds great. So encouraging more of that, hopefully in the future. But it'll be just a real usable space and a nice entrance. And Andy can talk about sort of the design concept of how we wanted the entrance to sort of look from St. Philip Street and tie in both directions.
Well, do we need to walk over there and talk?
Can if you want. Or?
Well, we would get out of people's way a little bit maybe. But for myself, just reflecting on the campus and this building's presence on campus, and this places, it seems to me that driving down Calhoun, you don't get much of a sense of having arrived at the college. It's only on Cumming Street, you know, where we have the opportunity to present ourselves, and it's not quite so congested usually. There's even room to pull over and drop off and stuff like that. And I'm wondering how that, if at all, or if, you know, or in what way, that idea of, you know, a welcome to the community played into your thinking about the design.
Yeah, it is a huge part. I mean, responding to the greenway was one of our biggest criteria in design, and you'll see, if you saw in the design, this canopy that comes out and welcomes is aligned with the greenway. And right now, as you kind of mentioned, there's secondary entrances. There's about 5 secondary entry points to this facility, but there's no dedicated, clear main entry. And we wanted to address that with a clear, welcoming, long glass in front of the lobby that kind of, you know, glows at night and allows transparency for people to see the artwork from the students that's on display inside. Or if there's an event and you see people gathering and you can come in, if there's a student black box show, you might not have even known, but we wanted people to walk by and see there's something going on and to want to stop in.
We're going to have a marquee or something?
Well, not specifically a marquee in the sense of
You see people doing things.
yeah,
That's the idea.
yeah. There'll be some posters probably on the wall as events are coming up. That'll be curated by the faculty, but we wanted to provide that opportunity. But yeah, it was providing a very clear entry point that was welcoming to the public. That it's not just a private student space. This is part of the community. We really wanted to invite people in.
Cool. Very nice. So you still, I guess parking, that's not part of your purview. You still are keeping that lot over there or not?
The lot is staying, actually the lot will be torn up in order to put subsurface storage from stormwater.
I was going to wonder how we could
And then we'll replace it with permeable pavers rather than asphalt to help even further with keeping stormwater from going into the city system, which is already overwhelmed, as you probably know.
So you're going to be getting any infiltration back there?
Yeah, well, it'll come off of the roof.
Yeah, right.
And then it'll be piped into those tanks, and it'll hold it there for 48 hours. So in a major storm event,
Good thing
it
will drift
collects
out
it
of
on
it.
site, and then once it stops raining and the city system can handle it, it'll slowly filter back in.
I got you. Well, we're all thinking a lot about the drainage these days.
Yeah.
And the college is in an interesting place to try to help with that effort. You know, we've looked at a couple of ideas for George Street, you know, adopting some of the concepts of using it for drainage, like you're suggesting under the pavement, like they were talking about for meeting at King Street, you know, on George Street. Give us a good excuse to redo it. It's in terrible shape.
Yeah,
But I guess the limit of your work essentially stops at the end of that parking lot.
correct.
Well, it's great that you're introducing all those other things.
Yeah.
Well, let's go look and talk about before and after if we can.
Sure.
Yeah.